Good evening, everyone. This is Richard Hackett from Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting. We will begin shortly, and we'll go over some instructions on how to attend this meeting and how to listen in either Spanish or English language. So go ahead, Kim.
Esta noche tenemos interpretación. Para activar interpretación, por favor, vaya a la parte inferior de su pantalla y pulse sobre el icono del planeta y seleccione Español. Gracias.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Gary Sanfason. I'm the recovery manager for Boulder County. I want to welcome you to joining us tonight on the topic of rebuilding in unincorporated Boulder County. I want to make clear that this is focused on unincorporated Boulder County, not Superior. We heard that Superior did send out the press release to their residents as well. And if anyone from Superior is on this call, you're welcome to stay, but this is the focus will be on unincorporated Boulder County only. I also want to welcome all three county commissioners, Commissioner Lochiman, Commissioner Jones, and Commissioner Levy. They're in attendance. Appreciate their participation. We're going to be giving out a lot of information tonight. We're really excited to have come up with a lot of different options and ideas about rebuilding and direction. It's taken a few weeks, but we're really excited, and we'll be recording this. We will have a PowerPoint slides available as well. In terms of the agenda, I'm going to give a kind of a recap of what we've done since the 19th, that first community meeting. We're going to hear about what it's required to receive a deconstruction permit if you're opting out of the debris removal program, the coordinated program. We're going to hear also about temporary emergency housing, some lessons learned from fire from our expert on wildfire partners. We want to then spend the bulk of the time on what are the paths forward for rebuilding, and that'll be the Land Use Code Article 19 process. And then we're really excited to hear about some of the green building resources that have been collected and will be collected to help you in your rebuilding process, which will then lead us to what is the construction process look like by our chief building official, and what are some of the transportation resources we have available, and then any upcoming meetings and webinars and the process for moving forward. Next slide. So many of you, I'm sure, attended the January 19th community meeting. And I just want to give a quick recap of that. As you recall, that meeting was really an opportunity for county staff to listen, to better understand what your needs are, what your hopes are, what kind of ideas you had in terms of rebuilding. And we used that information to guide us in the drafting of this process that you're going to learn about today, the different pathways. And that was intentional. We've learned over the years in recovery that you know the best what you want. So rather than staff trying to guess, we always start with listening. So thank you for all of the comments you gave us and ideas and questions. So what have we been doing since that meeting? Well, first of all, we had to finish up the whole response to the disaster and kind of transition to the short-term recovery. So that means creating a whole organization within the county to be able to have an efficient process for coordinating amongst all the different teams. We also had to coordinate, obviously, with our partners in Louisville and Superior, and that takes time to build those bridges and those connections. Another part of this was getting some policy direction from our leadership about the rebuilding process and how to move forward. And as I said, it's really exciting. We have a number of staff working with area nonprofits, the governor's office, looking at obtaining green building resources and incentives. And we will be able to share some exciting news tonight about some of that, and there'll be a lot more to come. We've also begun the process of bringing in additional staffing to help process and provide support for you in rebuilding. And then obviously right after the event, a lot of our staff were out in the field doing the damage assessment and assessing what was the level of damage and making sure we had an accurate count. So we understood the scope and you understood, you know, whether your home was lost or not. And then finally, certainly all the comments that you gave were awesome, and it took us time to work through those, to put them in common themes, and use those in crafting the rebuilding guide that has been released and the FAQ document. And you can see the links here, but also you can go to our website, boco.org/Marshall and look up the rebuilding tab, and all that information is there. And I guess another key piece of this to let you know about is you will be assigned a rebuilding coordinator when you're ready. And part of that is providing you with, you know, property specific information so you can work with your architect and know how to move forward. So that's also been what we've been doing in terms of assembly. So obviously a lot of work has occurred. I'm really proud of all the staff who've participated in that work. There's still a lot of work to do moving forward, but we are really confident, given all the input you gave us, that we have a really clear path for moving forward, and that's what we're excited to present to you tonight and share with you. And there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions, and we'll answer them as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kim Sanchez.
And actually, first on our agenda tonight is information on deconstruction and site cleanup permits, which will be presented by Kathy Giselle in our building division of community planning and permitting. So Kathy, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. Thanks. All right, hi everybody. My name is Kathy Gissel. I'm the Permit Operations Manager with Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting. Appreciate you all joining us here tonight for all of this exciting information we have for you. In regards to the deconstruction site cleanup permits, I first want to just thank you all for all of the patience that you have had with us as we have been working to get this up and running. I know that everybody is pretty anxious to get their sites cleaned up and try to get back to a sense of normal and back home. Just want you all to know that the time that we've been spending getting this all together is we've been spending this time working with the city of Louisville, the town of Superior, to make sure that we're really aligned on what we're doing across the jurisdiction, so that we're doing things similarly. And what we've been basing it off of is just making sure that we're doing it safely. We want to make, yes, I'm sorry. We want to make sure that you are safe as you are cleaning up your site. We want to make sure that your neighbors are safe as you are cleaning up your site. Or we also want to make sure our soils and our watersheds are staying safe as well. So just wanted to let you all know that that's where the time has been spent to make sure that this is going well. So tonight, we're not going to talk about option 1 that's listed on the slide here. I just wanted to kind of let you all know that all properties that were affected in the fire will be required to do debris removal and also site cleanup measures on the property. And there are 2 options to do that. The first option is through the county debris removal program. I just wanted to point out that they have extended the opt-in deadline to midnight on Monday, February 14th from the 8th. So if you are wanting to opt in and you haven't done that yet, you do still have the ability to do that through Monday evening. Then I've got on here some contact information for the county's debris removal program. So the other option to get your site cleaned up is to hire an independent licensed contractor. If you are going to go that route, we've got some permitting processes and requirements that you'll need to follow through community planning and permitting. Next slide. All right, so if you're opting out of the debris removal program, what do you need to do? The first thing that you need to do is submit your right of entry opt-out form to the county's debris removal program. So even if you're opting in, you need to fill that form out, and also opting out. And please make sure that you retain a copy of that form when you submit that over to them, because you will need a copy of it to apply for your permit application through CP&P. Next thing you're going to want to do is hire a Boulder County licensed contractor to perform the work, or you can do the work yourself. It's up to you on how you want to do that. The other thing you'll need to do is submit a disposal notification form to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. That's going to just let them know, let public health know that you are doing this work on the property. They're going to want to know who's doing the work on your property and where you plan to take that the debris to, what type of which landfill you're going to take it to. And we also ask that you prepare a very basic aerial of your property showing us where the foundation locations are and the ash footprint. This again is something very basic. It can just be something on Google Earth. Even something hand drawn is completely fine. It doesn't need to be anything professionally provided for you. And all of these items that I've listed out here, they will be listed on our website. I do have a website. Actually, the website link is on the slide before, but we'll get that link out to everybody so that you can get onto the website and you can access all of the forms that you need and find out where you need to submit them to. Next slide. All right, so after you've taken care of those first measures that I've talked about in the last slide, you're going to want to apply for a deconstruction site cleanup permit with Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting. I do want to point out that if you are opting into the program, for those of you who are opting in, you don't need to apply for a deconstruction site cleanup permit with Community Planning and Permitting. That will be taken care of through the debris removal program. So these steps here are just for those of you who are going to opt out. We are going to begin processing these applications tomorrow. So those of you who have your applications in, we will start going through those and making sure you have everything you need for that application, and we'll start getting those through the system and get those issued for you. Those of you who have not applied, or even those of you who have applied but need to submit additional information, here are some steps for you. You'll need to apply through our online portal. I'll listed out the link here for you. You're going to need to create an account in that system if you don't have one already. You're going to need to apply for a building permit. You know, you're not building anything with this permit, but it's just how our system kind of labels it. So just want to indicate that you will want to choose building permit as the type of permit you want to apply for. And then the project type is going to be deconstruction of structure. Again, I know that a lot of the structures are already gone. So this seems a little worded incorrectly, but it's how it's set up in our system previously. So please just use these drop downs when you go into apply for that. Please do also indicate in the project description that the work is due to Marshall Fire. This is going to help us prioritize your permit. So please do make sure that you put that in there so we don't, so we can push that your permit to the top of the permits that are coming in for the day. When you're applying for your permit, you do need to make sure to attach a couple of documents in there. The first is going to be that right of entry form to opt out that I mentioned before. So although you've already provided it to the county debris program, we do need you to also attach it to this permit application. And it does need to be signed by the property owner. We want to make sure that the property owner has indicated that they do not want to have the county do the work for them. And we want to have that on file. Do also want you to upload that basic aerial of your property. That just helps our inspectors when they come out to do the building inspector, the inspections on the property, helps them know, where those foundations were, where the ash areas are, so they can pay attention to those. It's also important, couple of things of importance for licensed contractors. In order to get this debris cleanup permit issued through the county, if you are not doing the work yourself, the contractor that you hire does need to have at least a Class M license with Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting. The other type of license that the contractor will need is a hauler's license, and that's going to be through the Boulder County Resource Conservation Department. The hauler's license is going to be important when the contractor goes to take the debris to the landfill. So that's not something that needs to be in place before we issue the permit, but it will need to be in place before the hauler, before the contractor can haul the debris to the landfill. And then after you've applied for your permit, please just make sure to watch your emails for automatic emails that come from our permitting system and also from our staff. Those emails are going to tell you what the next steps are. These permits are going to take a couple of days to issue. We are hoping to get those done as quickly as possible for you because we do know you all want to get on your way with this work, but it will take probably a day or two to get those issued for you. But please do watch your emails, check your spam in case some of those emails do go to your spam. Next slide. All right, so once the permit is issued, you're going to get an email from our permit specialist. It's going to have a couple of attachments for you. One of the attachments will be the permit itself, as well as a couple of publications that will go along with it. On the permit, it's really important that you and/or your contractor are looking at the conditions that are listed on there. There is a lot of information that will be listed, but every piece of it is very important along the way. You will need to know how the site needs to be prepped before the work begins, how the debris needs to be handled, what inspections are going to be required, what requirements are going to be needing to be met based on the amount of soil that you remove from the property, and how the site will need to be left based on when you're rebuilding, when you're planning to rebuild. So it will be different if you're planning to rebuild within the next 6 months, as opposed to if it's going to be longer than 6 months. So please do make sure that you and your contractor look at those conditions. We will be requiring that these permits are closed out prior to the issuance of any of the rebuilding permits. Okay. And that's what I've got on those. So I'll turn it over to Ron Flax.
Yeah, hi, Ron Flax. I'm the Deputy Director for Community Planning and Permitting, as well as the Chief Building Official for the county. And I wanted to just take a moment and talk a little bit about temporary housing on these sites. So we do have provisions within the code for such a use. It does require the approval of the building official and a permit for that temporary housing. There are further details about this that will be laid out in the Article 19 provisions that that Kim Sanchez will be talking about in a few moments. But there are some key concerns that we do need to just make sure are fully covered. Primarily, those things are things like the wind and snow loads, making sure that whatever structure you're in has a safe water supply, that the waste products from the home or the temporary housing are being handled in a safe and hygienic manner. And then we also have this sort of catch-all of basic health and safety. So we just want to make sure that if anyone is using the existing site to live on during the construction process, after the site's been cleaned up, but before the new home has been erected, that we're not creating any additional safety hazards, that everyone is safe, that the neighbors are safe from especially from the waste products, and that we don't have any further tragedies related to a wind event that overturns a structure. So there is a process for doing this. It's not particularly onerous, but there are some provisions that need to be we need to pay close attention to. So there is again, the additional information will lay that out in fair good detail in the Article 19 provisions. I think Jim, you're next.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Webster. I'm the Wildfire Partners Program Coordinator for the Community Planning and Permitting Department. I'm going to talk about some of the lessons learned from this fire and other fires. I'm not going to be talking about specific building code requirements. My presentation is more as background or context. Next slide. So Boulder County started its wildfire mitigation efforts following the 1989 Black Tiger fire. So since then, the county's been very engaged in wildfire mitigation, preparing folks for future fires. So lots of experience in the Community Planning and Permitting Department with wildfires and wildfire mitigation. Next slide. Some of the lessons that we've learned, and these are taken from our Community Wildfire Protection Plan, is one of the things that we point out and that folks are aware of, that wildfires can take place any time of year. So here are different months that we found wildfires in the area, and we've had the Old Stage Fire, 2 Old Stage fires, one in January and one in November. So the fact that this fire happened in December, we talk about no longer having a fire season, but wildfires can really take place any time of the year. So that factors into our preparation efforts. Next slide. Other lessons that we talk about when we talk about community wildfire protection is that wildfires are also a risk to residents on the plains. Their high winds are a leading concern in our fires, as we're well aware in the Marshall Fire, the wind gusts exceeding 100 miles an hour, and that we know that firefighters cannot defend and save every home. So we have lots of lessons from past fires to build upon, not just the Marshall Fire. Next slide. That being said, our efforts since 1989 in wildfire mitigation programs have been focused in the foothills and mountains. And you see here a map of our fire zone, zone 1 and zone 2. So all of the things that we've been doing since '89 in terms of our wildfire mitigation code requirements, our preparation, mitigation, community preparedness, lots and lots of activity in wildfire management zone 1, but we have not been active in terms of our regulations and programs in the fire footprint of the Marshall Fire, fire management zone 2. We focused on activities in zone 1, partly in response to the majority of fires and home destruction occurring in that area. And wildfires, sure. And in terms of the risk assessments, focused on the highest level of wildfire risk, highest probability of home loss in the forested areas. So our programs in the past have been focused in the foothills and in the mountains. Next slide. This is a picture of a home that was built according to our code requirements in the Netherland area during the Cold Springs fire. It's clear we have to communicate that there is no fireproof home. Our mitigation efforts and ignition resistant construction, defensible space requirements help reduce the risk. They don't prevent the risk. In the Cold Springs fire, there were 19 homes that were involved in our programs through voluntary efforts and requirements. Those 19 homes survived. You can see in this case with this home built with ignition resistant construction, the fire passed through the property, ignited many of the trees on that property, did a little damage in terms of the exterior window, but the dual panes held. And this fire is an example of a home surviving with good ignition resistant construction and building materials. Some people call these homes that survive a fire a miracle home. And there's often a lot of factors going into whether a home survives in terms of suppression resources. But one factor that we looked at are building materials and defensible space. So we do have successes from past fires who homeowners that have implemented these programs, those homes survive at a higher rate than the folks that don't do the mitigation. Next slide. So just a little background in terms of different ways homes are ignited during wildfires. Embers are the source that most homes are ignited. Direct flame contact, radiant heat, or other ways. This is a picture from a lab in South Carolina where they study home ignition. Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, where we had partners and researchers looking at homes are destroyed. So they do laboratory experiments and then in-field experiments. So understanding the science of home ignition is what we do. And a lot of people think of that flame front, but we're also not just looking at that direct flame contact and that radiant heat. We're really focused on embers and preventing embers from igniting a home. If the home doesn't ignite, doesn't burn and become destroyed. So we're really trying to prevent that ignition. Next slide, please. So here's an example from the Waldo Canyon fire, at least some of the portion of the fire, not the entire portion, but it breaks down the percentage of how the structures were ignited. And you see that the embers, that first category were the majority of the homes. Also, there's structural exposure and the direct flame contact. We don't have these statistics yet for the Marshall fire. There's a lot of ongoing research, and this research takes time. So we'll see research coming out of the fire for months and years. Lots of researchers in a community here in Boulder with universities, lots of interest in doing research. We don't have these statistics yet for the Marshall fire, but that's the type of things we look at in terms of how homes were destroyed and informing our decisions on how best to protect future homes from ignition. Next slide. So when we do mitigation, we start with the structure. Some people think of mitigation as cutting down trees, as forestry, but we really start with the structure. And here's an example from the Marshall fire. It's a commercial structure that had good ignition resistant materials. They didn't follow the defensible space guidelines in the sense they had shrubs right up against the house here. You can see, and those shrubs ignited. If it hadn't been good ignition resistant materials, that home would likely, or in case this commercial structure, likely would have been gone. This is near the cinema there. There's construction and commercial buildings that were destroyed right across the parking lot for this home. But really the importance of that, the structure and looking at those ignition resistant materials that we'll talk more about later in the meeting. But mitigation really starts with the structure, and we look closely at those building materials. Next slide. So this is from the Marshall fire, a home that survived because of suppression resources. Firefighters were here to help defend this house, prevent it from igniting. You can see here that the sliding glass door remained intact. That was tempered glass, and it didn't, in terms of break, in terms with direct flame contact. But the windows above were not required to be tempered glass, and those were blown out in the fire, and embers entered the home into the bedroom, and there are embers on the carpet that didn't ignite. But this is sort of an example. It's not an example telling everybody that, hey, we're going to require tempered windows. This example is really to say, what we have to think about is the weakest link. Some people think of mitigation as sort of an a la carte menu that, hey, I'm going to do IR construction, ignition resistant construction for maybe my eaves and my door, but maybe not my windows. Or it's not a la carte menu. You have to look holistically at the construction, because that fire will find the weakest link. We can spend a lot of time upgrading one element, and that's great. But if we forget about a vulnerability, looking at pathways and vulnerabilities of how homes ignite. So this is an example that the tempered glass and the sliding glass door was good, but really didn't have that beneficial impact, because the windows right above it were the weak link, not the tempered glass that were exposed during this fire. Next slide. And it's just not the building materials. And this is a little dark, it's hard to see, but the detail of construction is very important. So those small openings. So this crack of light you can see leads to the same house where we saw the glass and the windows, same house that we visited. You can see that the light there, and there was heat damage and embers in the subfloor insulation. So we really focus on openings and preventing embers from getting in openings. That's why in existing homes we screen vents to reduce the number of embers entering in attics and other locations. So we talk a lot about building materials, and you can build with good ignition resistant or non-combustible materials, but it's also important to look at details. So there's not openings and other vulnerabilities where homes will be ignited. It's another example from this fire of that.
Hey, Jim, this is Rick Hackett staff. Just a reminder to slow down for the interpreter and take some nice pauses.
Thanks, Rick. Next slide. So there's a team of about 15 folks from around the country, California and other places coming in. We spent 2 days looking at some of the fire, Marshall Fire area, and saw different observations. The individual from California was saying, this looks a lot like California. And for us in Colorado, this was different than some of the other fires that we've done post-fire investigations on. Saw a lot of fencing ignite, and fencing can be a wick or fuse from fuels up to the house. So in our Wildfire Management Zone 1 and the work we do with homeowners in the foothills and mountains, we talk about a non-combustible or initially resistant material the first 3 to 5 feet of the fence. So here's an example, metal fence just on that where it connects with the house. So fencing is a major concern, and so that's a part. In addition to the ignition resistant construction, we look at other factors in the defensible space and the attachment. So fencing was certainly a concern in the Marshall Fire. Lots of fences were ignited, and saw pathways of ignition from fenceways to homes. So we like to break up that fuse by putting in this. You can see the example of a metal fence in that first 3 to 5 feet. Next slide. The other thing, in addition to the ignition resistant construction that we look at, is the landscaping, and especially that area right around the house. We had examples that we visited with wood mulch up against the base of walls. You can imagine in an ember storm that we talk about igniting a home, because the combustible mulch ignites first, and that's the pathway towards the house. So we saw examples here. So we talk a lot about that first 5 feet. In the Calwood fire, we talked to homeowners whose homes survived, and right before they evacuated, they cleaned up all their pine needles and pine cones from around their house. And that was one reason that was the miracle house. It wasn't necessarily a miracle, it was some of the mitigation work that they had done in advance. So the landscaping, and we really look at that first 5 feet. Here's a picture of gravel and weed barrier. So that's something that's a typical mitigation requirement in the foothills and mountains, and we work with homeowners to do some of these. So these are just a few of the vulnerabilities and pathways that we look at, and some of the lessons that we learn from past fires that we can help reduce home loss in the future if we take proactive steps in advance. And so I'll turn it over now to the next presenter, and thank everybody for their time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Sanchez, and I'm the Deputy Director of Planning in Community Planning and Permitting, and also helping lead this rebuilding process for everyone with our colleagues in the Oscar office at the county as well. So first off, just want to reiterate to everybody that we may not be able to answer all of your questions in our slides and in our presentations tonight, but we will certainly be available to answer questions for you via email, phone calls, setting up virtual meetings, and however it is that you want to talk in this still COVID world that we're living in. So tonight is not our only opportunity to answer your questions, and we look forward to this being the beginning of many conversations that we'll have with you moving into the future. So to start off with the rebuilding approach after the Marshall Fire, the important message that we want you to know is that we are committed to helping you navigate the rebuilding process. And this may be over the long term, over the next months, year, or years. So however long it takes you to rebuild and recover fully from this event, our staff is committed to working with you all the way. Marshall Fire rebuilds and repairs, so the building permits and planning review processes for anything related to recovery from the Marshall Fire will be handled separately from all of our typical processes, planning processes, and we will be prioritizing these projects. This means for those of you who are familiar with our typical processes, you don't need to schedule a pre-application conference to initiate the conversation around the rebuild project. You also don't need to be request to be added to our application submittal schedule. So we'll be dealing with all of the rebuilds and repairs separately from our typical processes. As Gary Samphasan mentioned earlier, we also plan on having rebuilding coordinators available to you. So a planner on our staff will be assigned to each property owner to help that property owner and or their architect, builder, any design professionals navigate the rebuilding process. So all of the properties in unincorporated Boulder County are very unique, and each had different square footage, different structures. Many are facing different issues as far as setbacks or development in platted areas versus freestanding parcels. So we know that there are unique circumstances for each of the parcels, and we'd like to have a person that is set up to help answer the specific questions related to your property. To that end, we will also be assembling packets of property-specific information. So many of the things that you would get in a pre-application conference. So things like what is the existing floor area on the property? What does the assessor show as the existing square footage on your property? What building permit records do we have? What planning reviews may have been approved in the past? What is the PSM, which is the presumptive size maximum? Essentially, what is the compatible size for developing in your neighborhood? All of those things, which are really site specific, will be put together in an information packet that we will be able to distribute to each property owner when they're ready to embark on the rebuilding process. Community Permit and Planning is also going to be hiring more staff so that we can accommodate this type of service to Marshall Fire residents and also be able to continue with our regular workloads, knowing that many of the architects and builders who are helping Marshall Fire victims are also going to be continuing their regular workloads as well. So the paths forward for rebuilding. If you haven't already taken a look at the rebuilding handout that we put together, it's a guide for all of the different steps involved in rebuilding. Please make sure that you take a look at that publication. Much of the information plus more that we're going to be going over here tonight is outlined in that handout, and you will be able to access that on the Marshall Fire website. So essentially, we have two paths that we've outlined for moving forward. At this point in time, if you are rebuilding the same structure that you lost in the fire, so that means the original location and footprint of that structure, the same floor area or smaller, so the same size of structure, and the same or a lower height of that structure, you can move forward immediately and apply for a building permit with the commitment to rebuild with additional wildfire resiliency measures. So those required wildfire mitigation measures include ignition resistant construction and materials. So we'd like to see ignition resistant roofing, siding, eaves, windows, doors, vents, gutters, fencing, decks, and accessory structures, as well as creating defensible space around your structure and in your yard. So this is to address some of the issues that Jim Webster brought up in the lessons learned section from this presentation. We really do like to see, we really do have an interest in seeing that what gets rebuilt is rebuilt in a more resilient way that really responds to the hazards that we're experiencing. If you wish to make changes to pre-existing structures, then you'll need to pause for a moment and proceed after an Article 19 streamlined review that specifically addresses rebuilding after the Marshall Fire is adopted. So the Article 19 provisions will replace the site plan review process and substitute for it. Site plan review is the process that's typically required when somebody is building a new structure. Article 19 will allow for an expedited review of a limited number of issues that are really specific to the Marshall Fire rebuild area. This process is similar to our approach that followed the 4 Mile and the Calwood fires. And I think we've posted the Article 19 section of our land use code in some of the Q&A that have been coming in, and that a link to Article 19 is also available in our rebuilding handout. So what are some of the benefits to Article 19? What Article 19 will do is these provisions will allow for a longer time frame for rebuilding under a streamlined review. So right now, a project would be exempt from site plan review if a property owner is restoring the same structure, again, meaning the original location, floor area, and height within 1 year of the disaster. After that, site plan review would be required. We know, however, that this time frame may not always be realistic for every property owner. Insurance settlements sometimes take longer than expected. Design may take longer than expected. And so we want to do what we can to alleviate any unnecessary stress on the time frame for rebuilding. So the Article 19 provisions will evaluate what time might be necessary for the particular area of the Marshall Fire, and will seek your input on what timing you need to rebuild. I know we've received some comments so far that might be a few years that people may need to be able to move forward under a streamlined review rather than site plan review. Article 19 provisions will also address non-conforming structures. So non-conforming structures are things like structures that are currently in the required lot line setbacks. So any structures that were destroyed that did not meet the setbacks currently have 6 months to rebuild under our current regulations. However, the Article 19 provisions would allow for non-conforming structures to have a longer period of time for them to be replaced and rebuilt. So there's some flexibility in the timing related to non-conforming structures as well. Article 19 provisions will allow for modifications to the pre-existing structures. So the idea behind this is to allow for some level of change to occur without triggering the site plan review process, which is about a 6 to 8 week review. So Article 19 would, as I mentioned, focus on a limited number of issues that are pertinent to the Marshall Fire area, and will outline parameters and allowances for acceptable changes in those areas. So things that we'll be exploring are there is there a certain square footage that would be allowable for people to add on to their homes without triggering site plan review? We know that after living in many of these structures for over 20 years, people may have desired changes that they would like to make to their structure. We've heard of people wanting to go from a 2-story house, for instance, to a 1-level house and aging in place. So things like that may change the footprint, expand the footprint. You may change the location. There may be different designs that people want to rebuild. And so Article 19 would really address how to provide some allowances for the changes that people want to make to the rebuilt structure. And we will be seeking input from the community on those changes. We've received quite a bit already, thanks to those of you who filled out our rebuilding survey early on. We've been going through those responses and looking at what kinds of changes people are interested in making, and we plan to continue getting that type of input from you in order to inform the regulations that we draft. The other thing that the Article 19 provisions will do is address resiliency. So in the face of climate change, building more resilient and energy efficient structures is really important. And so as a part of the Article 19 regulations, staff will be proposing ignition resistant materials to be part of those provisions. Another question that has come up is one related to accessory dwelling units. So currently, our land use code only allows accessory dwelling units in limited circumstances. And those circumstances are, you can have an additional unit, dwelling unit on your property if you have the need for an agricultural worker. So you have a working farm and some help that needs to reside on your property 24/7 for assistance of that agricultural use of your property. The second is a family care unit for a sick relative or family member that needs help on your site. And the third instance is for historic units, those cases where we have a historic structure that we'd like to see preserved rather than demolished in order to add, perhaps more square footage onto a property. So the county has heard that the community has raised interest in having ADUs available. We are going to be considering that question of whether to allow accessory dwelling units in the Marshall Fire rebuild provisions. And there's some question that if we do allow ADUs, whether those should be addressed as part of Article 19, or whether that's a broader land use code change that should happen for all of unincorporated Boulder County. As far as the timeline for the Article 19 provisions, it is a code change. So it does require public hearings in front of both the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners, who ultimately adopt those regulations as part of our land use code. So the estimated timeline that we see for adoption of the regulations would be in late March or early April for their final adoption. So the process includes what has currently been ongoing, including staff considering all of the ideas that have been communicated to us by the community so far, performing analysis of the area, of the structures, lessons learned, all of the things that we really need to do to evaluate what should be included in our rebuilding approach, and then drafting regulations for review by the public. So the first step involving the community on that would be, we plan to hold another community outreach meeting with you to respond to ideas that we've come up with for Article 19. That meeting will be on Wednesday, February 23rd, again at 6:00 p.m. We will make another public announcement about that and make sure that we get word out for people to be able to join that meeting. So that meeting will likely take the form of the last public meeting that we had, where we can hear from the community members directly in order to get feedback on some of the parts of the Article 19 provisions that we are thinking about. Then the actual draft regulations will come after that and go for review in front of the Planning Commission on either Wednesday, March 16th, or an earlier special session if we're able to schedule a session outside of Planning Commission's regular hearing schedule. After the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, and the Board of County Commissioners would hold a public hearing, and that hearing we've reserved dates on either Thursday, March 17th, which is directly after the Planning Commission meeting, or if we need more time to contemplate some of the testimony and input that we've heard at Planning Commission, we can schedule a public hearing for the Board of County Commissioners on Tuesday, April 5th. So either way, we're working on a pretty quick timeline, hoping to, most importantly, get input from the community who will be utilizing these provisions to rebuild, and making sure that everyone understands the layout and the framework to rebuild before the final regulations are adopted. So more time also does allow for the collaborative efforts that are taking place between the county, municipalities of Louisville and Superior, the nonprofits that we've been working with, Excel, state, and others on the programs and options for rebuilding assistance and resources to take further shape. So there is a lot of work and a lot of efforts underway to help with incentives and resources for both green building and some of the wildfire resiliency measures. Things like how will materials be sourced? Are there funds available to help pay for the incremental costs of these measures? And so all of these discussions are underway. We're making a lot of great progress, which we're excited to share with you tonight, some of that. if we have a little bit more time, I think those things will be more firmly developed by the time people are ready to rebuild. So as mentioned before, we do plan on having rebuilding coordinators assigned to each property owner in the rebuild area. So property owners and their architects, builders, or design professionals will be able to work directly with a staff person in community planning and permitting immediately if they're building the same structure that was lost in the fire, or if they are building a modified structure, meaning they're adding floor area, constructing in a different configuration or footprint, or building in a different location, those people will be assigned a rebuilding coordinator after the Article 19 regulations are adopted. We also encourage neighborhoods to coordinate amongst each other. So you might recall, those of you who attended the last community meeting on January 19th, that we had a presenter who talked about neighborhood blocks that were created, and those blocks collaborating with, a common architect or a common builder in order to gain, some efficiencies of scale. So encourage neighborhoods to be coordinating with each other and look at that type of approach that was done in California. And to the extent that the county can help facilitate those discussions and organization, we're happy to play a part in that. So moving on to some of the resources and incentives that we have available, I'll hand it over to Zach Swank. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, Kim. Good evening, everyone. My name is Zach Swank. I'm the Built Environment Coordinator for Boulder County's Office of Sustainability, Climate Action, and Resilience. I'll be going over a couple of gathering opportunities and incentives that are available since the last time we spoke. Next slide, please. So the first is on Wednesday, February 16th. That's next Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. The Colorado Green Building Guild, a local nonprofit, will be hosting an info session on what to ask before you build, advice from green building pros. This will be the first of a year-long series of sessions that they'll be hosting. Those sessions will be available in both English and Spanish, and there will be live Q&A. So there's a link there that's cgbg.org/events/thinking about green building. That'll be a great opportunity to learn more about why you would want to consider building a high performance home, what that means, sort of a general sort of intro session to what to think about as you're conceiving of your new home. And again, that'll be the first of a series that'll be produced over the course of the year. Next slide, please. Another opportunity is the Boulder Valley Build Expo. That is happening Friday, February 25th, and Saturday, February 26th. Each day will feature a 2.5-hour session. There are 15 builders currently signed up. Other builders can sign up if they're interested or request to sign up. There will be county and municipal staff there present to answer questions. There will also be high performance home experts there present to ask your questions. And the link to that is below. Next slide. Xcel Energy we are working in partnership with Xcel Energy, and Xcel Energy is coming up with incentives to help folks rebuild or repair homes. This one is about repairing homes or damaged structures that are still standing. They have doubled the rebate that they're offering for replacing smoke damaged insulation in the 4 zip codes listed there. And please note that in order to participate in the program, you must use a contractor that's participating in Excel's program. I'll share more details of how to find out more information about that a little later. Next slide. So I'm going to be walking through some of the incentives that Xcel Energy is proposing for rebuilding. I want to point out that these are draft incentives. They are subject to change. There are terms and conditions that will apply, and these incentives will require regulatory approval, which will take several months. So please take all of this with a grain of salt. These are provisional incentives that we're sharing with you now. Next slide. Also want to be clear that these are direct to consumer incentives. These are not builder incentives. These incentives would go to homeowners, and they are for homeowners who lost their homes in the Marshall Fire and rebuild on their own lots. Incentives for homes rebuilt by new residents moving into fire-affected parcels, or residents who sell their parcel without rebuilding will be different. Next slide. Okay, with all those caveats, these are the provisional incentives that Xcel Energy is thinking about. You'll see that there's two columns, one that shows for 2018 Energy Conservation Code and earlier. That first column, the middle column of the three, is where unincorporated homes in unincorporated Boulder County, that's the column that applies to you. The other column is for communities that have adopted the 2021 Energy Conservation Code, like the city of Louisville. So for in unincorporated Boulder County, for building a code compliant home, there is no direct to homeowner incentive from Xcel Energy. They're reserving that for the higher energy compliance code. If you build a home that meets the Energy Star Homes version 3.2 standard, there's a $10,000 incentive being proposed by Xcel for building to that standard. If you build a home that meets the Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Homes version 2, $12,500. If you build a home that meets the standard of Energy Star's new certification program that they're currently finalizing, that would be $17,500. And if you build a home that meets Passive House standards from either the Passive House Institute or Passive House US, that'll be $37,500. And those incentives do not stack together. So you get one or the other. You can't add them all together. Next slide. One final thing is we are listing details about all the information I just shared and more at our new page on energysmartyes.com/rebuild. There you'll find links to the webinar, to the Home Builders Expo, information about the incentives I just shared. And you can also reach out to us at info@energysmartyes.com, and that should say our phone number. But if you go there to our website at energysmartyes.com/rebuild, you can get our phone number there and get a hold of us that way. And we're happy to answer questions related to building a high performance home. We are not the right resource to go to for questions about debris removal, codes, things like that, where we can help you with the high performance home, green rebuilding, things like that. I think that's it for me. Thanks, Kim.
Hello, Ron Flax, Chief Building Official for the county. I wanted to just give just a broad brush overview of the building process. You've already had quite a bit of information in this event so far, and there actually are quite a few details to the building process itself. but I just wanted to just take a moment and talk in broad brushstrokes what the process is. And I think the most important piece of it is this first item here is choosing the professionals that you're going to be working with. This is going to have a really important consequence in terms of how smoothly your process goes. So I urge you to take the time to vet the team that you're going to be working with, to make sure you're asking for information about their background, information about references of previous customers, and just make sure you're choosing carefully. I know there's a lot of anxiety about this whole process and concerns about the timing and getting professionals who have the capacity to help. But it's been my experience that really taking the time to make sure you're choosing carefully is well worth the extra time spent up front. Once you have your design team together, there's sort of this process by which you put together the permit application, and that's a set of that's the application materials that include the drawings that show what you're planning on building. And there's a lot of details that are in that application that are in those drawing sets. But the goal is to have a complete permit application that gives the contractor all the information that they need in order to build the house and make sure that it meets the minimum safety standards provided in the building code. The actual county review process is relatively quick. I know there's a lot of anxiety about this part of the process as well, but we in past events where we've lost homes, we've been able to prioritize the people who have lost their homes and prioritize those permits. And typically we're able to very comfortably get that whole process turned around in something around 6 weeks or so. That's we're still working on evaluating our process right now, and just in preparation for the anticipated number of permits that we're expecting to see. We're just walking through our process right now and making sure we identify and address any of those pinch points where maybe we need to bring in extra staffing to help manage the process. But the truth of the matter is that Boulder County does already move through a lot of permits on an annual basis, and this additional permitting load is something that we are well equipped to handle. So I really just want to ask people to really take a breath and not overly worry about how that process goes. I'm expecting that once we have those complete permit applications, that process to be relatively straightforward. Once you have the permit in hand, I really do encourage everybody to take a moment and review the conditions that show up on the issued permit. There's a fair bit of detail that's provided on those documents. And the places where we've seen people run into trouble is where they didn't take that moment at the beginning and read through those documents and just become a little bit familiar with what's going to be needed during the construction process, so that nobody is surprised later. That's really probably the most important piece to do, is just to make sure that that everybody who's working on the project is familiar with what those requirements are going to be. Once you've done that, really it's just about proceeding with the construction itself and the required inspections. Again, that is a gross oversimplification. The actual process of building a house, it requires a lot of steps, a lot of details, but in broad strokes, that's what we're talking about: building the house and doing the inspections. Next slide, please. So it's important to know what building code we're working with here. So currently the Boulder County is using the 2015 International Residential Code with local amendments. If you are working with somebody who maybe isn't as familiar with working in Boulder County, I really do want people to become a little bit familiar with our local amendments. There's sort of 3 categories of those local amendments that people need to pay closer attention to because they are a little bit different than what some other communities use. The big items are the energy code, the ignition resistant construction details, and some of that for these projects will be described in detail in the Article 19 provisions. And then also our wind and snow loads. So we do have wind and snow load maps that are particular to each site. So we want to just make sure that people who are working in Boulder County are familiar with those details. That information will be part of those packets, the wind and snow loads. But if you are working with an architect or a contractor who is not so familiar with working in Boulder County, you really do want to pay close attention to the energy code and ignition resistant construction details. Depending upon the interest that we get from this group, I may be hosting some additional workshops that are really focused on drilling down into some of the details in the energy code for those designers or contractors who need to understand that piece a little bit better. The other thing that I really want to get across this evening is that we have a whole team of people who are really eager and willing and able to help answer site-specific questions that your design team might have about what is required. And I really want to encourage those folks to reach out directly with those questions. We are ready to help your design team succeed. This is what we want to do. We want to make sure that people understand what's needed up front so we don't have surprises later. No one likes surprises in the construction process. So I really do encourage everybody who has those questions to go ahead and reach out with those questions. Next slide, please. One other piece of this is the contractor licensing, you want to make sure that you're choosing, as I said before, construction professionals that really are well qualified to do the work that you're asking them to do. I have found that local experience is actually a pretty useful piece of this because you can find out what they understand about building in this region, but also you can reach out to previous customers, and those customers often are other members of our community, and those referrals, those references are really important. In our contractors licensing program, we have made sure that the publicly viewable website does not only list and verifies that the person, the professional that you're talking with is in fact a properly licensed contractor, but we've also made it readily available so you can see when that license was issued and have some idea of what past projects they may have recently completed. So you can distinguish between somebody who's been working in the community for a long time versus maybe somebody who has never done a project in Boulder County before, but yet has recently acquired a license. Again, if you have questions specific to contractor licensing, I encourage you to reach out and ask those questions. We are ready and eager to help with that. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to pass this off. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Hello, everyone. I'm Cami Pillar-Edson with Boulder County Transportation Planning. Thank you for participating tonight. We're getting close to the end, I promise. I have one slide for you before we kind of wrap things up and head into our Q&A section here. But my goal tonight is to make sure that you're aware of all of the transportation resources that are currently available, as well as talk about some potential future options. I just believe I just put in the chat for everybody the website that's listed on the top of the slide. And don't worry about keeping track of that website right now if you don't need to. I just want to point out on the top of every Boulder County website page, you're going to see this red toolbar, or I guess red bar that says Marshall Fire information. If you click on that, from any web page you get to in Boulder County, you're going to get to a drop-down menu, and transportation will be one of the resources listed, and it will take you directly to this page. So while we don't have time tonight to go into all of the details of the currently available resources, I wanted to give you a high-level overview of what is available, especially for those of you who are temporarily relocated. There might be some resources out there that can help you and yours get to and from where you need to. We recognize that a lot of you have lost cars, bikes, scooters, things that would have been part of your day-to-day transportation options. So as you're learning about what new resources are in your temporarily new neighborhoods or changed neighborhoods, we wanted to share what's available. And these resources include bicycle resources. There's a number of free and discounted used bikes being available by local shops, as well as some discounted bike rentals. So that would be in the first drop-down menu listed in the picture there. We also have some car shares, which means shares that can be, or cars that can be shared by multiple people around the county. There are multiple options listed there where you can get information about free subscriptions or service credits. There are free door-to-door services through partners such as Via Mobility. There are a number of communities in Boulder County that have buses called Ride Free Longmont, Ride Free Lafayette, and they can help you get where you want to go. And the contact information is under that drop-down menu on the free of how to work with those systems where there's free buses. There's a link to regional trails. We know some of you may be living temporarily closer to some trails that might help you and yours get to and from places you need to. Through ride-hail services such as Uber, they're offering free credits to travel to and from key sites such as the DAC or the Disaster Assistance Center. There is a road closure map, which currently right now there are no road closures, but if and when there were and during the fire, this would be one place where you could find which roads and trails are open or closed, but right now we're good, everything is open. One of the sections here is about RTD bus services and passes. There's links to get a hold of RTD to look up schedules, fares, how to schedule maybe flex ride services. We're also have updated where locally you can pick up passes that are being made available to impacted residents, free passes. There's some ride cards and some ticket books available. So those resources will be listed there as well. To those of you who are BVSD families, just know it's going to be updated as soon as possible, but we will also link you to who you need to reach out to in BVSD to find out about the transportation resources that they are providing to help transport students to and from school, as we know that's a challenge right now for many families. There's a drop-down menu here about how to load the transit app. We recommend or encourage Boulder County residents, whether they're impacted by the fire or not, use the transit app. It allows you to compare different resources such as bus or ride hail to see who's the cheapest and who's the fastest. So it might help as kind of a one-stop shop to make your life a little bit more convenient instead of having to go to all these different agencies' websites or scheduling platforms individually. The transit app pulls them all together into one place. And if there's different resources not listed under the categories shown here, they'd be placed under the other options. So we're hoping for some of you that might be new information, especially if you're relocated, about what transportation resources are out there. Please take a look at this at your convenience and your own time to see what resources might benefit you and yours. And it's not listed in the picture here, but at the bottom of this website is our contact information. So feel free to reach out to us anytime. And I know the website and how to reach us is also going to be reshared again at the end of this presentation. kind of related to the rebuilding process, we are going to be putting out a transportation needs survey soon. It's going to help us understand better what sort of transportation options or vehicles have been lost and what do you need or need replacing? Ideally, what do you want? This could also include the idea of rebuilding with a capacity to have electric vehicles, as well as possibly electric bikes, as well as those of you who might be needing or assistance with busing, car share memberships, carpool, a lot of the same resources that are currently available. We want to assess where are you currently relocated so we can best match resources to where they're needed around the county. That is my quick update for now. There'll be lots more information. I'm going to turn it back over to Kim to kind of wrap us up, but thank you for your time tonight, everybody. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you everyone for that information. So just to recap and to provide some context, the Colorado Green Building Guild will be holding some webinars beginning February 16th. The Boulder Valley Build Expo is being held on February 25th and 26th in Louisville. There will be a community outreach meeting on Article 19 about the Marshall Fire rebuilding provisions on February 23rd. And then we will have upcoming Article 19 public hearings in front of the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners. All of this information will be posted on the Marshall Fire website. There is an accordion dropdown on rebuilding specifically, so you can look there for detailed information. We do have contact information. I see that the general Marshall Fire rebuilding has not, email has not been added, but we will add that into either the chat or Q&A so people can see that. And then we've added some other emails for building code. And I think this is maybe the wrong slide, but we'll make sure that we provide this information to you on the Marshall Fire website. So I think that is it for right now. And Gary, if you have any closing comments, I think we're done with the presentations.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. And I want to thank all the staff for your work and for presenting a lot of information. I want to just acknowledge that there was a lot of information we just presented to you. This will be posted, the recording, as well as the PowerPoint. So please, don't worry if you didn't catch all of it. There'll be plenty of opportunities for you to rehear this or talk to one of us. The other thing I just want to bring up is that on the chat, in the question and answer, there were some folks, appeared to me, contractors, architects, insurance folks, soliciting business. And I really wish they had not done that. And I want to urge everyone on the call to use your best judgment in how you decide to work with the contractor. The county requires contractors to be licensed. We have a list of those folks who are licensed in Boulder County. We would urge you to consider working with people who know the county regulations as well. So please don't jump at the first offer of someone to work with. Use your judgment and take your time. The other thing I want to say, if you're not already aware, there's an amazing woman by the name of Cheryl Gordon who is helping facilitate communications in unincorporated Boulder County. If you're not already on her list, I'm posting her email address. Please contact her and get on that list. She is doing an amazing job of helping to sift through all the different information and narrow it down to appropriate information that will serve you. I want to also let you know that there are some residents from all your different neighborhoods in the unincorporated area who are meeting every Friday. They call themselves the UBC, the Unincorporated Boulder County Committee. They're an informal group. They're trying to make sure that unincorporated Boulder County has a voice in these types of decisions and policy guidance. You can reach out to Cheryl to learn more about that. I want to urge you to stay involved. As Kim stated, there are a number of upcoming opportunities to continue to learn more. This is a process. Everything is changing day by day. Debris, insurance, funding opportunities, rebates. So just hang in there, take a breath. You have time. Take your time and do it well. We're here to support you how long it takes. I guess then just lastly, I just want to say thank you for your time. We are not going anywhere. We're going to be here for the long haul. So we look forward to working with you and to seeing you down the road. So thank you for your time tonight, and we'll be in touch. Thanks.